Hi everyone, my name is Archie Piatti and I'm Director of Public Policy at Tahrir Justice Center. I am here to talk with you about the recent changes we've seen here in the United States as the executive orders issued by President Donald Trump have come through. Now, I think it's important to note that Tahrir Justice Center is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that exists to serve with holistic legal and social services women and children who are fleeing gender-based violence. We work with women and girls who've come to the United States having experienced gender-based violence overseas. We also work with women and children who are here in the United States already and have experienced violence right here. In fact, 70% of our clients have experienced violence here in the United States by both green card holding and U.S. citizen men right here in the U.S. Tahrir Justice Center is an organization that provides services but also does a range of public policy advocacy here in Washington, D.C. We have 4 offices here in Washington, one as well as in Baltimore, Houston, Texas, and in the San Francisco Bay Area. Since the executive orders have come out last week, two signed on January 25th and one signed on January 27th, we've had the opportunity to review the orders, do some deep analysis, work with coalition partners across the country, and spend some time actually triaging the fallout of these orders locally and across the country. And so what I wanted to do, you will have seen, I'm sure, videos also posted now by our CEO, Layli Miller-Moreau, and what I would do now is simply add to what she's commented on by sharing a little bit more information, what we're doing on the ground every day and what we're hoping to accomplish in the short term. One thing I want to share really is that we have several concerns that run through these 3 orders. We have sort of prioritized them, and they involve certainly the ban that we saw in one of the orders that came out on Friday night, certainly the ban on refugees. So there were no refugees being processed and admitted for 120 days. And again, a ban on entrance from 7 countries in particular. And Layli did some talking about these in a video that was posted on a Facebook Live video from Sunday, January 29th. But I want to talk a little bit more about this particular executive order, the ban, and what its repercussions have been. We will do some additional videos on some of our other primary concerns, including detention of arriving asylum seekers, police and community policing, and what that will mean for the safety of women and children who are trying to get help from trying to get protection from violence by, for example, calling 911, and what we expect to see in terms of increased deportations and enforcement over the next few years. To start out with, the ban on refugees coming into the United States, the complete ban on refugees for the next 120 days. So 4 months is dramatic. I think it's important that we note who we're talking about. There are women and children and men and families around the world, millions right now, that are fleeing all manner of violence. The global agencies that work with refugees being processed around the world have talked about this being the greatest refugee crisis since World War II. And what's important for us to remember is that when we talk about refugees, we're talking about people who cannot get protection from their own governments, from their own, where they live, where they have their homes and their families, their cultures, their communities. There's no way for them to escape the violence. And so, we knew this. We saw this in the Holocaust era. We all remember what we've learned about that era. Some of us have families who are still living, who experience tragedy. The Holocaust era taught us that World War II taught us that we cannot strand people overseas when they are experiencing high degrees of violence in their home countries, and their governments are doing nothing to protect them. And so the United States, along with a number of other countries, came together to draft a refugee convention. It's an international treaty which makes possible the movement of individuals from one country to another to get protection. The United States so the convention was signed in 1951, and in 1969 there was a protocol added to it, and the United States ratified that. We are a member then, and we have international legal obligations to open our doors and provide full and fair access to our system of to welcome people into our country when they fit the definition of a refugee, which is clear both in the treaty and in our own United States law. For decades now, then, we have had codified law in the United States through our immigration statutes, which provide for bringing refugees who've been processed overseas and bring them into the United States. We also have a process for assisting refugees once they come to the United States and they are inside our country or they've approached our border. When they ask for the permission to be considered a refugee and to stay in our country, we have a whole legal system here that's been created to provide them with that opportunity. So our system is here. It is set up. In fact, we have the most stringent security vetting system in the world for making sure that those who come into the United States do not, as refugees, do not present a risk to us. And research by nonpartisan and both conservative and liberal institutions has shown that there is very, very minimal risk, and that it is incredibly, we have more of a chance of being struck by lightning, if you will, than we do at suffering at the hands of a refugee. Now, I think it's important to remember that we have gone through multiple episodes, even in the Obama administration, and as also in administrations before that, where we have looked carefully at who is coming in, how they're being vetted, whether additional security procedures need to be implemented in order to make sure that the system is protecting Americans and those who qualify as refugees who are trying to come in to the United States. In fact, in 2011, President Obama at the time did do a temporary ban. It wasn't actually a ban, it was a slowing down, I'll say, of about 6 months while he directed the State Department to review its safety protocols and the way it was screening refugees from Iraq. At the time, those refugees were not prevented from coming. There was not a systematic shutdown of the entire system, but there was a reevaluation, which was methodical and within the bounds of the law. And then, once there was satisfaction that the process was actually safe again, those refugee processes continued. What we have seen in the last week is a very different approach to handling questions that may have legitimately arisen around refugee processing. The order that came having to do with refugees on Friday night, on January 27th, was sweeping, and it was dramatic. What it has done is halted all refugee processing over the next 120 days, and required investigation, reporting, reconsideration, implementation, a number of steps, which, even if they need to happen, which I wouldn't concede, do need to happen in a methodical way and with understanding of what is already in place and the severe impact this is having on the lives of those who may have already been through an exhaustive procedure of vetting and have been waiting for possibly as much as 2 years for the opportunity to reach safety and build a stable life with their families here in the United States. In other words, I think this process has this executive order goes too far in shutting down the system entirely for 4 months while there is investigation ongoing. in the meantime, I think it's important to recognize that our process of vetting, like I said, is incredibly stringent. It's very strict. It's very exacting. Less than 1% of refugees, in fact, who apply even make it through the first round of interviews. There are 3 rounds of interviews already, and multiple biometric and other checks through multiple channels, in fact, which demonstrate that we have a very secure system. In the end, I am concerned not only about the ban of 120 days, because the shutting down of refugees worries me as an advocate for immigrants and refugees. It worries me as an advocate for women who are fleeing gender-based violence, because we know that a large proportion of refugees in the world right now are women who've experienced rape, human trafficking. They are women who've experienced domestic violence. They continue to be vulnerable to and experience gender-based violence in the camps, in the transit centers where they are coming through as they are trying to make their way to a stable home. And so anything we do to completely shut this down it could be very detrimental. I want to talk briefly about what this ban has done, what shutting down the refugee system has done, in addition to the ban on 7 countries and their entry, which is for 90 days, though of course it could be renewed, and so it's indefinite at this point, and could expand to a broader list of countries as far as we know. As we received news of this over the weekend, it became clear that a need for immigration lawyers to be on the ground was there. I was on the phone over the weekend and then in person at Dulles Airport. The director of and other staff members in our San Francisco office were at the San Francisco airport. The director of our Houston office was at the Houston International Airport. We were watching what was going on all weekend long. Although our mission is focused on women and girls, we were very concerned what might erupt, what we might see in these airports, what was happening to families, who are the people who were going to be detained and impacted. We spent a long period of time this weekend in the airports trying to see how the Customs and Border Protection officials who were there were handling the processing of individuals who were entering, who might have been caught up in this very abrupt shift. What we saw was that while I was there at Dulles, I'll speak from my own experience, I arrived at Dulles and I saw a lot of young attorneys organized. It was like, it was incredible. They had set up printers with extension cords and cables, and there were laptop computers set up all around, and there were protesters there with signs, but there were a lot of people there to help and to pay attention to what was happening. What was clear was that there was very little information coming out. We were learning that behind closed doors, there may have been as many as 30, then maybe 50, maybe 60 individuals being detained by Customs and Border Protection as they were coming through security. So we had no idea what was going on back there. A Virginia federal court had issued a temporary restraining order requiring access to attorneys for those who were being held, yet that access was not happening. Tahereh played a role in our offices in trying to bring members of Congress and media to the table to try to see if that kind of pressure might assist us in getting access to the people behind the closed doors. And we weren't able to access anyone as attorneys, anyone who was being held, and we couldn't get any information from Customs and Border Protection. What we started to understand was that it was chaos. There were families who were being separated. You will have read and heard about families with dire consequences now, who were mothers who've passed away because they couldn't come here and get medical treatment as was planned. Families who were separated for hours and hours, if not days, and maybe now some families who've been separated for months. We also had, I've heard of One U.S. citizen, man who was on a domestic flight but was strip searched for no apparent reason, simply because of confusion in the airports around what these orders mean. So the abrupt way in which the orders came out, what seems to be a lack of vetting or legal analysis or information sharing inside the federal government before their rollout, even a lack of buy-in or understanding at the Department of Justice, means that what we saw over the weekend and in the ensuing days has been damaging to many people and certainly confusing to all of us. Very concerned as well here at Tahirih about what some of these provisions mean in the order. It remains unclear whether those people who are from the 7 countries but have green cards will be allowed to enter. I know that's been stated, but it's still clear that there is confusion. So if you have a green card and you left the country, then it seems likely that you'll be allowed in. But what if you received permission to enter the United States and obtain your green card after entering here? So you've never entered the United States with a green card before. It seems right now that those individuals are not being permitted in. That's a concern. What if you are somebody who was granted refugee status or asylum status and you're now helping a family member to come in? Will that person be allowed in? We don't know the answer to that. We have questions around other kinds of applications in the United States where somebody might have suffered violence right here in the U.S. They might have been living here for 2, 3, 5, 10 years, and they've made an application, and a part of that process, although they're already here, legally speaking, a part of that process requires admission. It's a legal term of art. But if they have to go through that process, will they be granted if they're from one of the seven countries, or will they not? We still don't know the answer to that question. So there are many, many questions left unanswered, and many, as a practicing immigration lawyer, as somebody who is currently doing policy work here in DC, so many questions remain unanswered, and it seems likely that chaos will ensue for a while at the airports, as well as among clients and those who are seeking to bring family here, to make applications to regularize their status right here in the United States. So this is just a brief discussion about where we've been, at the airports, and then also providing immigration expertise and knowledge to clients who are calling us, others from the community who are calling us and asking us what to expect, activists and advocates who don't typically focus on immigration but who are curious. What is this going to mean for my community, my clients, the families we work with, churches, mosques, and others who are reaching out and saying, what will this mean? Will this be over in 90 days? Will this be over in 120 days? What can we expect? Truthfully, nobody knows at this time. And so we will do everything we can to continue to advocate with our members of Congress for answers. We will continue to advocate with the administration for answers, and we will continue to bring you whatever information we can through these videos, through written commentary, and anything else we can to let you know what we're learning here on the front lines. We certainly welcome your support, especially in joining us in calling your representatives and senators in your local jurisdictions, wherever you are across the country, in whatever state. If you're in a state and you think, well, my representative already supports these issues, please don't hesitate to call and register your support for immigrants and refugees. You don't have to be very specific. You don't have to talk about specific bills, but it can be very helpful to reach out and just let them know that you value and respect the refugee and immigration process, and you hope that immigrants and refugees will continue to enjoy and benefit from the robust system we have already in place in the United States. That is going to be important not only to speak out against executive orders, but also because we do expect congressional action in the next few months, both for immigrants, but also congressional action that could be detrimental to immigrants and refugees. So the more people who are registering support, the better. And so we look forward to enjoying your continued support as well, and advocating with you on the front lines at Tahrir. Thank you so much. I'll be back again to talk about what are so-called sanctuary cities and how do they impact our clients, as well as what detention at our southern border might look like, and who are some of the people we are talking about when we imagine increased deportations and enforcement in the United States. I look forward to seeing you again. Thanks.